In Genesis 1:27 it says, "So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God he created them. Male and female he created them." In biology, an organism is male or female if it is structured to perform one of the respective roles in reproduction. This definition does not require any arbitrary measurable or quantifiable physical characteristics or behaviors. It requires understanding the reproductive system and the reproduction process.
After God created mankind, he gave them their purpose. Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves on the ground. And in order to be able to do this, Adam didn't just need a romantic companion. He needed someone who could help him be fruitful and multiply. He needed a woman.
Some of you may have heard verses like these used as weapons against members of the LGBT community. Or maybe you've passed churches with signs that say something like, "It's Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve," which isn't exactly a welcome mat for someone who's questioning. What you may not have been told is that the duality of male and female isn't just about sex and marriage. It's the final culmination of the complementary duality that runs throughout the entire creation narrative.
As the story in Genesis 1 unfolds, we discover that there are all sorts of other things in God's creation which are likewise supposed to be complementaries. We have not only heaven and earth, we have the sea and the dry land. And then within the animal kingdom, we have, of course, male and female. And then the story reaches its great climax with the creation of human beings in the image of God. And so right there at the start of the whole Bible as we have it, in the start of the book of Genesis, we have this rich symbolic account of God's good creation, which then has male plus female at the heart of it as itself a signpost pointing to that great complementarity of God's whole creation of heaven and earth together.
Jesus says in Mark 10, "At the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh." In other words, it's not just about any two people committing to love each other and getting government benefits. Jesus says marriage exists because males exist and females exist.
Marriage was designed for men and women to come together to help fill the earth and subdue it, and to participate in the universal frequency that also includes heaven and earth, the night and the day, the sea and the dry land, and eventually points to Christ and his church.
Going back to same-sex relationships, a man and a man or a woman and a woman cannot reflect the union of Christ and the church. Instead, these only reflect Christ and Christ or church and church. It doesn't show a complete picture. But does this mean that gay people in the church are destined to live a meaningless, unsymbolic life?
In section 2, we talked about the three trees of not affirming same-sex behavior, Christian cruelty, and the idolatry of romance. The position of Jen Hatmaker and Matthew Vines is that Christians with same-sex attraction cannot flourish until that same-sex attraction is affirmed. However, as Wesley Hill wrote in his book, Spiritual Friendship, a great company of saints testifies to the fact that we can indeed flourish without romance, marriage, or children.
Never before in Christian history was romance regarded as essential to human flourishing. This is a modern misunderstanding. And this is also how we know that Jen Hatmaker and Matthew Vines have a problem with the wrong tree. However, the very next line in Wesley Hill's book is, "I don't know of one saint who witnesses to the possibility of our flourishing without love altogether." In other words, love always has been considered essential, but romance is only one type of love. This is how we know not only that Scripture does not affirm homosexual relationships, but also that these other two trees need to be chopped down. We need to replace the tree of cruelty with a tree of empathy and compassion, and replace the tree of idolatry with a tree of true worship.
But let's get back to our discussion about gender. The question is, do men have to be a certain way to be considered men, and do women have to be a certain way to be women? Now you may look at me and think, that's a woman. But according to one test I took in college, apparently I'm not. I took something called the Gender Androgyny Survey in my human sexuality class. Now, some of the characteristics that described men included self-sufficient, ambitious, and have leadership abilities, whereas the words that described women included gullible, yielding, and inefficient. According to the test, I had too many qualities typically considered to be masculine in order to be labeled a woman. So instead, I was labeled androgynous.
Even outside of the transgender conversation, discussions about gender have been changing quite a bit over the last few years. In a show called Superstore, the store is hosting a gender reveal party for Glenn and his wife Jerusha. Earlier in the episode, Glenn gave the envelope with the baby's gender written in it to Garrett. And in this scene, they're ready to open it.
What is it?
I don't know.
What?
I mean, I don't know. You don't know. The doctor doesn't even know. I mean, what is gender anyway, right? It's just a construct. I mean, look around. We got football, you got ballet. You guys are writing this baby's code before it even comes out. You're perpetuating gender stereotypes. How about we let this kid figure out its own gender? You guys should be ashamed of yourselves.
In reality, he only said all that stuff because he actually lost the envelope. But his rant brings up an interesting question. So turn to the person next to you and discuss this. What makes something a stereotype?
A stereotype is something many people assume to be true about someone, but which isn't always necessarily true. Being masculine doesn't necessarily mean that you're athletic or like to play football, and being feminine doesn't necessarily mean you're dainty or always wear pink dresses. Not that there's anything wrong with these things, we're just saying that stereotypes don't always capture the fullness of what it means to be male or female. For instance, my husband, who most would consider rather masculine, is also a professional ballet dancer. And my sister, who most would consider feminine, is also a great kickboxer.
Now, it's also possible to swing to the opposite error of denying any important differences between male and female. But we have to take one thing at a time. Regarding our discussion of gender dysphoria, we needn't adopt the overly rigid stereotypes that might lead a boy to think he should be a girl because he is sensitive and artistic, or a girl to think she might really be a boy because she prefers sports over dolls. Acknowledging the richly diverse ways of being male and female can help children more readily identify with and accept their own embodiment.
Not only that, but if one of our goals is to make the church a more welcoming place for the LGBT community, then we need to realize that battles with same-sex attraction can sometimes be related to a sense of not quite measuring up to expected norms of what a man or woman is supposed to be like. So when the church reinforces superficial cultural stereotypes, the effect can be to worsen this sense of isolation and of not quite measuring up.
We should do what we can to make everyone feel welcome. But we still need to recognize something. Even after we've chopped down these two trees, and even if we avoid all triggering stereotypes, and even if all our disagreements about homosexuality are done in the kindest way possible, we still live in an age where we could be called hateful. And the pressure cooker that is our culture has led many Christians to want to be persuaded that the Bible condones same-sex marriage. And if we want to be persuaded of this, books like God and the Gay Christian could probably do this. But then the real question we need to ask is, whose disapproval do we fear?
Do you think you'll change? I mean, can you see, you're a man, I know, he has this incredible library, Rick Warren, literally one of the great libraries I've ever seen in my life, kept beautifully. You have all these books by all these great scholars. many of them will have evolved their thought processes over things, depending on how they see things. Can you see a time when not just you, but other Christian preachers, and indeed the Catholic Church and others, say, you know what, actually real equality means everyone has the same right to get married, gay or straight?
I cannot see that happening in my life. I fear the disapproval of God more than I fear your disapproval or the disapproval of society.
Those of us who are Christians also ought to ask ourselves, whose disapproval do we fear most? The disapproval of God or the disapproval of society? We need to be clear about whose opinion matters more to us, because that will shape how we respond to everything.
But the disapproval of God isn't just on affirming same-sex relationships. In Luke 11:46, Jesus says, "And you experts in the law, woe to you, because you load people down with burdens they can hardly carry, and you yourselves will not lift one finger to help them." We have to get better at bearing each other's burdens. So practically speaking, how should Christians interact with members of the LGBT community? We'll talk about these questions in our final section.